Ros, just to kick us off, I mean, success, we've heard, Ros, it's all about engagement, mutual understanding and sharing. Can the business community really embrace these ideals?
Yeah, I definitely think that it can, and I was really pleased to hear what the business representatives had to say in the different presentations about wanting to work across the geography and to engage with each other, to share about the technology that they're involved with and the need to be in their specific location, but also to want to find out more about what's going on in the other places. And my experience, having worked in Cambridge, UK for about 5 years at Granta Park and getting involved with Cambridge Network and Cambridge Wireless and One Nucleus, was there were some fantastic opportunities for businesses when they network with each other at a high level on their specialisms. I also, our head office for MEPC is at Milton Park, and I've done a lot of work with Oxford Bionetwork and know about the biotech scene in Oxford. And when I came to Silverstone, I found that companies seem to have the same sort of special approach to problem solving and creating IP, but they weren't involved in any sort of high-tech networking and didn't understand or know really about how it could help them with their business and their business decisions and growth aspirations. So setting up Silverstone Technology Cluster has helped that to start in this area. But what I think is the lesson from that is that Cambridge is literally an hour down the road from Silverstone, and yet people didn't know what was going on and how that could benefit them. And I think I have reached out to all the high-tech networking organisations and all my contacts at places like Oxford Innovations and technology parks and said, can we talk about how we can work together to benefit the businesses in all the clusters? And people came back immediately and positively saying, yes, thanks for suggesting it, we'd like to do it.
Because, as you were saying to me earlier, it's not just about importing new businesses into the area, it's supporting the existing ones that are here. Right.
Yeah, there's so many existing companies. That's the whole starting point, surely, why the government wants to invest in the area, because of all the high-tech activity and the assets. And I think that what the Minister said and what some of the other people have said is that we are limited by the scale of our ambition. And I've said this at a conference in July, and I'll say it again. We aren't a corridor or an arc, and it's not just about Oxford and Cambridge. This is a cluster of clusters. It's a high-tech supercluster in the southeast. And if somebody somewhere else in the world said, well, it sounds great, but can you justify that claim? I think we could just list Harwell and the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, and then Cambridge and Oxford and Cranfield and University of Buckingham, not to mention Silverstone and Bletchley and Pinewood, and the list goes on, frankly. And I just think a graphic that showed us and the ARC in relation to London and the Midlands Engine that showed the geography and all the assets, people would just get it. And I think that is something that we can use to promote UK PLC post-Brexit.
Elliot, a point that Keith made in his presentation was he hadn't really got any evidence that businesses are actually investing because of the ARC yet. I mean, what has to happen before you as businesses really start wading in with your money?
Yeah, I think the extent of investment has been fairly linear over the last couple of decades here, Cambridge, London, particularly in the life sciences sector. I think the transformation picks a little bit up on what Ros has just said, which is the next wave of technology, and Silicon Valley is a very good example of how this is happening, is the integration of advanced thinking around AI, big data sets, how that then links into biological data sets into healthcare. And those are areas in which no natural linear technology advancement that we've known to date will work. And so you've got to bring together and converge new sets of technology. And I think in that setting, the ARC, the corridor, contains all of that. Everything from high engineering through high-tech and biologic genomes brings together all in one place, as it does in Silicon Valley. And I guess it's worth noting that we have to think on a world scale. It's very easy to sit in the middle of Oxford or Milton Keynes or Cambridge and assume we're not.
So what has to happen here to start this process of business getting more involved?
Well, I think events like this, beginning to tell the story, there's no doubt that the profile has to increase. We need to get attention on a world scale. I see represented from China here. I'm not sure how many people are here from the US today, but it really is not us talking to ourselves, it's about us talking to the rest of the world.
And I mean, Alex, were you reassured by what the Minister said?
Well, it was a more positive response from a Treasury Minister than you normally get when you ask for fiscal devolution. I also wondered for a while whether his comment about ministers being here today and gone tomorrow was an optimistic or a pessimistic point. But I suppose the thing that really gives me potential confidence here is that, I mean, just actually from an Anglian Water point of view, just briefly, we've put in a business plan to the regulator just last week, which puts in £6.5 billion worth of investment in the 5 years from 2020. It is fundamentally critical that the level of investment in water and sewerage is there to support the kind of growth along the area. And I do love Rosie's description of a supercluster. That's a nice way of thinking about the particular nature of what we've got. But that underpinning is absolutely critical. But what I was heartened by his response was when he came back and said, if you organise yourselves in such a way that actually was confidence in the delivery vehicles that sit at that regional level, then there's the potential for fiscal devolution to follow, was what I heard. So I took that as a kind of real invitation to say, well, okay, let's do this. And for companies like mine and my investors, if there was something operating at the ARC level that said, here's what's going to be happening over the longer term period at a strategic planning level, so we're not trying to chase what 57 different district councils are doing, with no disrespect to district councillors out there, but something that operates at that broader level for key infrastructure and not just transport, then I think we've got something to go for.
So your message to Treasury and to Westminster would be what?
My message to Treasury and Westminster would be to say, there is net additional growth for the UK if you back this area. It is not that stuff happens here that would otherwise happen elsewhere in the UK. It wouldn't happen at all. I mean, we know from AstraZeneca's conversations that had they not relocated to Cambridge, they would have left the UK. So you've got to get this right, and you've got to give not just funding, but the fiscal devolution to allow the area itself to look after its own future, not repeatedly go cap in hand to Treasury.
So Keith, what's really, I mean, what you mentioned your board was getting very excited about this area. I mean, how do you keep your board excited about this area?
Well, ultimately, we have to grow our business profitably to prove that that investment is paying off over time. The confidence that we have around this is founded on a little bit of hope at the moment, if I'm honest. These are good areas of the southeast anyway. Oxford, Cambridge, and all parts in between, and up, and slightly down, are good parts of the UK anyway. And we could grow our business anyway. I was particularly struck, and it's really echoing a point that was raised just now, that if we were to organise ourselves, then we would get the money. If we were to organise ourselves around planning, then we would get the investment in infrastructure, if we were to do that. So governance, so my big message here is, the building blocks of this are economic vision. You said that was the cornerstone of what you have been building around, so we have to deliver that collectively. We're a facilitator of that process at the moment. It's got to be delivered. The next cornerstone is the vehicle for that to happen. And that means that if you're responsible for Oxfordshire, I keep picking on Jeremy's area, if you were responsible for Oxfordshire, you're going to give something up. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes next.
Which brings you back to, success is about engagement, mutual understanding and sharing. Can the business community, can the local authority community, is that possible?
I'm with Rosie, 100% with Rosie, that the business community would do it.
I think the business community just needs to see the business opportunity.
Yeah.
That's what I said earlier in the summer.
No problem.
And I think it's about understanding what's going on in the rest of the geography. It's about that inward investment and interest from outside. It's about supporting them to show off what they've got. And it's looking at how they get their capabilities into other sectors.
But George, the Northern Powerhouse is still in many ways dogged by the internal rivalries between regions, the culture clashes. I mean, how do you overcome that? What work have you done? What evidence is that you're overcoming that those rivalries?
It's a hard slog, and you've just got to keep working at it. But I think businesses can have a positive impact on collaboration. And a good example from my perspective, I was on the Transport for the North. I was a business person on the board of Transport for the North, along with a lot of local authority leaders for the first 3 years of its existence. And it started out as very parochial, not very good at all. But over the 3 years, we got to a point where 19 combined or strategic authorities, all with transport responsibilities across the North, agreed on a single strategy, and not everybody got what they wanted. That had never happened before, and some of the business voices around the table were instrumental in encouraging that outcome.
So are you actually able to measure the sum of the parts being greater than the individual?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the proof will be in the eating. I mean, the final strategy is due out very soon, and it needs central government to do its bit and sign up around backing that. But it's the first time the whole of the North, public and private sector, 19 authorities have all agreed on something. It's never happened before.
Keith,
I just pick up one point on timing. I personally 100% agree with you, George, that you've got to go through the process of finding the common ground, building the trust and relationships, thinking of the common policy and strategy. I don't necessarily subscribe right now to take your time, because I think there will be a window with central government where politically it's expedient for them to announce something. And I don't know whether anyone else had that feeling from him. Yeah. Like, when are you going to give us the excuse to announce something? I wondered. I don't know. But so let's think about
he wants a ribbon to cut.
Sorry?
He wants a ribbon to cut.
Yeah. Maybe, but let's use it to our advantage. So process, the necessity of forming, important, but the timing, I wonder if we need to try hard to go a little bit quicker.
Alex.
So I want to pick up on George's earlier comments around the independent economic review that you said was your cornerstone, really, for how you've moved it on. And I certainly believe that business coming together can provide a means which helps the more internecine warfare that sometimes emerges amongst local government to resolve itself. And I think that's what happened with the Independent Economic Review. On Friday, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's Independent Economic Review will report. Yep. It's been chaired by Kate Barker. It sets a whole series of clear priorities for the area, which are set out through that independent review and backed by the business community. Now, that's one part of the arc, but it's an important part of the arc. And I just wonder, picking up your point, really, Keith, that this could actually be something that would be something to piggyback off, to say, actually, we've got some of this already in place, let's move as quickly as we can and give the Treasury a difficult choice to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on what you were saying on the timing of it and what we need to get on with. We are getting on with it already, I think, is what I wanted to say, that the LEPs are working together, local industrial strategies are coming out, new business representatives are being consulted, that's happening. Plus, we did a submission of an expression of interest to a Strength in Places bid in July, which includes Oxford Brookes and Cranfield and Cambridge Network and Oxford Buyer Network and us and Harwell and Red Bull and Bosch and some of the smaller high-tech companies like Total Sim. And we've submitted that and we've said several things, and one of them that we haven't mentioned that I want to mention is how we approach the skills agenda in this area differently. Because I think what this is all about, if we can really get it right, is inspiring businesses. And if we can inspire the business community and we can get them thinking, this is the place to be and I want to think differently about my business, then we can think differently about how we work with schools and teachers.
Elliot, I mean, you want to talk about skills. What's the skills issue with you?
Yeah, so I think that we've got to recognise that there's got to be connected policy. The government can build influence. There's a very good example in the development of the life sciences industrial strategy nationally, where policy around skills, around infrastructure, around funding were all coordinated, driven by business, working hand in hand with government. So it is absolutely achievable. But I think I was going to make Roz's point that we shouldn't just get hung up, and I know we're not, just on infrastructure. It is about the whole spectrum of activities that are necessary to make a successful supercluster.
Well, I suppose it is those, as you point out, the dynamic economic effects that make the whole thing work. I mean, coming back to, by the way, if you've got a question you want to put, Andrew's got a microphone. Make Andrew aware of your question you want to ask, and then he'll bring a microphone to you. One of the things which that we heard George say was that you can't sit on the sidelines. Business can't sit on the sidelines. But Elliot, where does the leadership come from? Who should be providing the leadership?
Yeah, so it has to come from within business, and there are many organisations now that are doing that. Again, in life sciences, a very good example in the shape of MedCity or the Northern Health Science Alliance that does that in life sciences. In Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire, we have Business Voice organisations, Advanced Oxford in Oxford and Cambridge Ahead in Cambridgeshire, but they're business-led. So it takes someone from the business community, or a small number of people, to take up the cudgel and see where the benefit for business is working within our local community in partnership.
So does that mean looking to the LEPs? Does that mean looking to other groupings of chambers of commerce, etc.?
So they're both places which will need to collaborate. Certainly the Cambridge example, the Oxford example, they're groups of businesses who've seen the need and the power of having a single voice in the same way as the Northern organisation's done.
Ros?
I suggest that we're all needed in this, that there's no one that can ignore it, and actually everyone will want to get involved and they'll play their part, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce, a LEP or a business cluster.
Yeah, I was very, very taken by George's points about don't be in competition with each other.
No.
And I think it's the same point Ros has made. So I'm on the board of Cambridge Ahead. We've led a lot of the work around the independent economic review getting going. But it's not, we've done it with Cambridge Network, with the Chambers of Commerce, with the CBI. I mean, we're all actually got the same overall aim, which is to maximise sustainable economic growth and quality of life for the communities we live and work in.
Because ultimately, I mean, we can put up on slides that the potential increase in economic activity is, 83 to 163 billion, whatever. I suppose it comes down to individual businesses taking the lead and recognising that value, and I suppose having the confidence to get involved. I mean, where does in Anglian Water, where does the confidence come from?
So I suppose the confidence would come. I mean, if you think about the level of investment we've just put forward and want to be able to continue to put forward, I want to be able to go to my board and say, you guys can invest in a further 6, 7, 8 billion pounds in this area because we've got absolute confidence that the growth that's set out is coming and we know where it's going.
There's a question for the floor. Yeah, say who you are, what you're... Just keep talking and it'll come on you.
University of Buckingham. We're actually a considerable business ourselves, as are other universities. And the Minister earlier on was gracious enough to correct his basic maths, that there are 9 universities in the corridor and not 2 or 3. Sometimes Cranfield get in there as well. And Anthony Selden would be very pleased to hear that we are in there. We have a meeting coming up with all the Vice-Chancellors and all the chairs and chief execs of the LEPs with the government to talk about how the universities can work more effectively together. And I'd just like to, and we've been in discussion with Silverstone. It's very nice to be mentioned. Thank you, Ross. And I'd just like to ask, what would you like to see from higher education for the corridor? Thank you.
Elliot?
Yeah, one very specific area, by the way of an example, would be bioinformaticians. So all of us in the room in our businesses need informaticians. In life sciences, we need bioinformaticians. We heard earlier an appeal from the floor to work with industry to begin to set up to generate students who are qualified in the areas we need. There are massive gaps. I sit on the National Genomics Board. One of the areas that's going to be a huge gap, we're generating 100,000 genomes of data. We've got no one to do the analysis right now. So it's really about needs-led education would be a key appeal
Ros?
for me.
Well, I would like the other universities in the geography to work with us like the University of Buckingham works with us. And I haven't been paid to say that by the University of Buckingham. And what I mean is it's about a genuine relationship where you want to work with business and you're going to come alongside and you're not going to disappear for the summer and you're not going to go off and write your papers if you're supposed to be running a network for a specific specialism. And that when you're writing a bid and leading it and inviting businesses to be a partner, you're not doing that just to get some equipment so you can attract some more students. You genuinely do want to work with businesses, indigenous businesses in the area to support their growth needs. And I've said that a few times. I haven't said it on a platform, but no one's disagreed with me about that situation and that issue. Problem is universities are well set up to write bids and manage them, but it doesn't mean they're the best leaders. of them.
Alex?
I'd say do whatever you can to ensure that the current effective partnerships across Europe between other institutions carry on whatever the hell the politics leads us with. That's so important that we find means by which those alliances and cross-learning between different institutions, I mean, Europe and internationally, happen.
Is there experience from the Northern Powerhouse of engaging with universities and academia?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we have over 20 universities across the Northern Powys region, so it's quite complicated. They're all very different. But I am seeing a gradual process of higher education circling the wagons around the independent economic review that we did 2 or 3 years ago. That identifies 4 key capabilities. So universities in the north are looking at how they prioritize efforts around those key capabilities as opposed to everything else that's out there. So I can see gradual alignment with the economic vision. It's probably too gradual, but it is detectable, it is happening.
Are there any more points from the floor that people want to raise? No? Yes? No? Okay. Finally, I mean, one of the, we've talked about the fact that we need to get more business engaged with the plan here. How do we raise awareness of this? Because we've heard some really great stories from businesses around here and that are really engaged and that are really aware of what's going on. But I imagine there's an awful lot more businesses that should be more engaged. I mean, Elliot, what do you do? Oh, no, so I'm going to start with Keith. Keith, what do you think? What do you think needs to happen to raise the awareness? I mean, I made the point about, is the name right? Does it start as simple as having a snappy name? Or what has to happen in your view to really boost the awareness to get more businesses involved?
Okay, I would love a snappy name because then we would all not trip over it every sentence. But in reality, it's going to take us putting out a consistent message. I think if we're putting out messages that are very different or even subtly different, it will undermine the whole pretty quickly. And therefore, if we can alight upon a series, it doesn't need to be long, doesn't need to be covering absolutely everything, but it needs to have enough content as to be realistic. And then we all talk about it in the same way with the business community. I think there is a place for this is a bit like the North, as you say, George. It is a place where there are lots of representative bodies. It's also, the corridor is also, has organisations and businesses that are adjacent to it. Reading, Thames Valley, Berkshire, for example, all wonder what's going on when I've met with them. And East Anglia, particularly around agri-tech and to an extent biotech, very interested about what's happening in Cambridge. So is Norwich in this arc? Is Berkshire? Where does it end? And then you go past them and you'll be into the next bit of technology, which might be aerospace, getting into Hampshire. I think there's an element of businesses wondering where does it start or finish, so being clear what our definition is as well at the moment.
Yeah. Elliot, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, to be slightly provocative, I think we need to target the messages at the right sorts of businesses. If you look around this room, fortunately, this has been supported by a lot of infrastructure companies. Yeah. But infrastructure companies are not the companies that will be generating the long-term economic growth that we're talking about over the next 30 years. They'll continue to build infrastructure. What we need are a series of organizations like Amazon, like Google in that set, like Amgen, like Regeneron in the life science sector, to understand what the proposition is here. None of it will happen without infrastructure, we understand that, but it's about an alignment of what the proposition is.
So Alex, why are businesses like Amazon, etc., not so engaged and not involved?
Well, I think they are and could be. I mean, actually, some of what Ros was talking about was a series of companies who are off that side. Completely agree with Elliot that the growth isn't going to come from infrastructure providers. Brilliant though we are, we're not going to be the big growth potential. It's an essential underpin. Yeah. But I think one of the issues is if you ask the guy in the street at the moment about what is the Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Oxford Arc all about, they might, if they know about it at all, they'll say it's 1 million homes, it's a road, it's a rail. it's not what's going to get the people you just talked about excited. No. It has to be about some of the things we've been talking about on this panel.
I do think we need a national political narrative about it, though.
Yeah.
I would love someone to be talking about it at a national level as being important to the country.
And it's the ability to draw from the unique kind of combination of clusters that exist in this area, which is the point Ros started with.
I mean,
it's really special and really exciting.
I mean, George, having a George Osborne behind a project like that, it helps.
Yeah, it certainly did. Obviously, he's doing other things now. He's still involved. He still chairs a Northern Powerhouse Partnership Organisation, which brings public and private sector together to carry out research and help augment the evidence base. So he's still engaged and still influential, I think. But I mean, the Northern Powerhouse has a Northern Powerhouse minister. I think it's the only structure of that type that has a minister. So Jake Berry, who is a Lancashire MP and a Communities and Local Government Minister, is also the Minister for the Northern Powerhouse. So you might want to think about how you might persuade a minister who probably also has a constituency in this area to take on some additional duties.
Well, no offence to other universities in the room, but there's quite a lot of cabinet ministers that were either at Oxford or Cambridge, apparently. Ros, I'm going to give you final word. I suppose this in many ways today is a call to arms. Can you sum up, from your position here in the heart of the heartland, what do you think should happen really to accelerate the process?
Well, I think we should welcome the government's focus, and I think we should acknowledge that the government's right about the focus. I think we should encourage all the focus and all the work that's going on in transport and housing, because we need all of that. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but we just need to beef up the focus on business, and it's simple really. We do need to get organised, so we do need to talk to each other across the geography, and we need a vision. We need to clearly articulate the business opportunity, and people like me and others across the geography need to work together to go back to government and say, we are organised, we know what we want, we can see what the business opportunity is. It's not the whole thing, because we can't tell from the outset what other opportunities will present themselves, but we've really got to start somewhere and set out our stall to government and say, we're worth investing in, and as a business community, we're up for it, and we can help us to maximise this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Ros, thanks to Alex, George, Keith and Elliot, our panel, for rounding us off. Thank you very much.